Welcome to FitBody Lifestyle, the show where we dive deep into the world of fitness, health, business, relationships, and the art of living a balanced life. I'm Jamie.
And I'm Greg, and we're here to give you the benefit of our experiences in the fitness and bodybuilding industry, the corporate world, running a business, personal development, and building healthy relationships.
Whether you're sweating it out in the gym, hustling in your business, or seeking balance in your everyday life, you're in the right place.
So lace up those sneakers and grab that water bottle, and let's get ready to transform our minds, our bodies, and our lives.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of FitBody Lifestyle. We're so happy that you decided to join us today. I'm here with my partner in crime here, Papa Bear, aka Gregory D. Bernard. And I am so excited about our guest today and our topic. So we're going to be introducing Culinary Cannabis with Chef Travis, two of my favorite subjects, food and cannabis. So marrying those two together, we're going to start out, Travis, by having you give us a check-in word. How are you feeling today?
I'm feeling recharged and energized right now.
Oh, I like that.
Yes,
That's awesome.
This, usually the start of the year is like, you really got to get going because you're at the bottom of the hill. But I found this year I took the appropriate time off and I was so ready to get going. So
that's an amazing feeling.
Yeah, absolutely.
So give our listeners a little bit of background. Introduce yourself and let them know, why are you here today?
So I'm Chef Travis Petersen. My brand and company is called the Nomad Cook. And I am a cannabis chef that's come from Canada. So I started cooking with cannabis in 2018. It's when Canada federally legalized the recreational use of cannabis. So I turned my house into a little pop-up restaurant over 420, was just going to do it the one weekend. I had 164 people come through my house over those 4 days. And to date, I've served over 25,000 people now, their first infused dining experience. So what was going to be a one-time thing, I found my passion of what I was meant to do. And from there, it just really took off. Originally being from Vancouver, my goal was to travel to Toronto and Montreal. I thought to be able to travel in your own country would be pretty cool. Fast forward, the pandemic locks everything down. My wife being from Arizona, we went down that first Christmas and saw everyone still working and no mask mandates and, a state that allowed people to live their life. And we decided to make a move. Canada was very strict. We couldn't have anyone inside. So we up and moved down to the US and we ended up, we're in over 70 cities now, 30 states hosting our dinners. So we'll spend, anywhere from 10 to 18 days a month touring city to city where we host pop-up dinners. So we'll build a one-night restaurant somewhere. We take anywhere from 20 to 35 guests and we'll host a dinner. And then we pack up and move on to the next city. So that's kind of in a quick little nutshell what I've been doing. And
Yeah. And I mean, you've done a couple of dinners for us.
Yes.
And the food is amazing. Yeah. The experience is incredible. And I think I've learned a lot from you already, which is why I was excited to have you on here to share a little bit more, because I think there are a lot of things that people have ideas about in regards to, utilizing cannabis and that kind of thing.
There's a lot of taboos. I mean, even myself, when I first started, I didn't want to be called a cannabis chef. I actually thought this was a fad, right? We're legalizing cannabis. There's a lot of hype built around it. But my anticipation was it would fizzle out and it would be young 20-year-olds as the demographic wanting to do this. My average age is 39 and I'm 60% female as my guests coming out to attend. So I kind of bought into that propaganda of, edibles mean the weed brownie. And when I first started cooking with cannabis, I was using isolates. So that's a form of extraction where you isolate THC by itself. You get it in a little tincture bottle, and you can eye drop on top precisely the amount of cannabis you want to be adding to the dish. I probably, through my first 6 months, our first 1,000 guests, that was the form that I was really using. And as I started really gaining a lot of attention for it, I felt it was really important to start looking into full spectrum extractions. So a full spectrum extraction is when you're not just focusing on THC, but all parts of the plant. The other cannabinoids like CBD, CBG, CBN, and what chefs who cook cannabis are most focused on are the terpenes. So the terpenes are not just the flavor and aroma of cannabis, but they're responsible for the effects that we feel when we use it. So when we go into our local dispensaries right now, we have these terms indica and sativa, right? Everyone knows these terms. Sativa means you're going to get a strain that's energetic and creative and gets you kind of going. And the indica is going to put you on the couch with the Cheetos ready for a long nap, right? And, it's a little bit of false advertising. Those terms are there to really categorize cannabis and help sell it to a new demographic coming in, because it can be hard to shop for strains. The terpenes are what are actually responsible for the effects that we're feeling when we use it. And terpenes are, the terpene compound is identically found in plants, fruits, and herbs. That's why we get those familiar aromas with certain strains. They smell like lemon. It smells like pine. It's got a gassy smell to it. And, a terpene by itself, it doesn't do anything to you when you consume it, right? It's literally just like a flavor and aroma. We use them in everyday products already. If you think about Mr. Clean, right? We're cleaning our house. We get that beautiful fresh pine smell. That is a terpene that's been extracted and added in there to give that aroma, right? If we think about some of our beauty products, right? Lavender is a really popular choice to add into moisturizers and stuff. That's because there's a terpene called linalool that we find in the lavender plant, and it's got a therapeutic effect of really relaxing and calming, right? So if we look at a terpene by itself, it's not going to do anything. But when we combine it with a cannabinoid like THC or CBD, we get something called an entourage effect. And that's what creates that certain reaction that gives a creativity boost, or maybe gives you the munchies, right? So if we look at a terpene called myrcene, which we find in mangoes and lemongrass, that terpene there has sedative effects, makes you very tired, but it also makes you hungry, right? So I have a problem of munching out when I consume cannabis. I keep going into the snack cupboard. So I really avoid strains that have myrcene in it, right? There's another terpene called linalool, again, which we find in lavender. It also has those sedative effects. So if I'm looking for a cannabis strain to help me with sleep, I can go into the dispensary, and it's not just, hey, give me an indica, right? Because that indica might have that myrcene strain in it, which is going to make me go and hit the pantry cupboard, plus make me tired. Right. Whereas if I go in and saying, I'm looking for strains that are high in linalool, most dispensaries should be able to answer that and tell you what strains are. If not, pulling out your phone and Googling that strain and that brand, most brands will label their terpene profiles of that strain, if not on the actual packaging online. So once you start to learn about what terpenes react best with your endocannabinoid system, it will change your entire experience with cannabis.
So Travis, let's back up a little bit.
Yeah.
That's a great kind of overview of it, and I want to break it down so that we understand. And
right.
And when I say we, I mean me. This stuff is very new to me.
Right.
So speaking Greek, speaking Canadian.
I'm almost thinking
speaking Canadian.
I'm almost thinking as we, in the animal kingdom, how there's kingdom, phylum, all that stuff. So in this area.
Right.
What's at the top of the house before? So is the marijuana plant itself at the top of the house, and then from there we go down to the different. You mentioned sativa and indica, so
right.
Those are categories. But how do we break this down so we go down the understanding?
Right now, there's sort of a myth that you want to be shopping for cannabis as the highest THC percentage possible, right? And that's a myth that I would encourage people to sort of divert from. So the way that when we first legalized cannabis in Canada, a lot of the dispensaries and brands were giving people cannabis journals, which at the time was like, oh, this is kind of corny. Why would I be journaling about my cannabis? But it's actually a very smart thing to do. Because if you were to every day, okay, this is the strain that I smoked by this brand, you Google, what are the top 3 terpenes in there? You write those terpenes.
So is terpene a strain then?
Terpenes, the flavor and aroma.
Okay.
So if we look at the cannabis flower, right, that little bud that we would break up and roll up into a joint, that's what we would call a cannabis flower.
Okay.
If we zoom in with a magnifying glass, you'll see these little translucent bulbs. They stick up. Those are called trichomes. And those trichomes are what contain the cannabinoids and our terpenes. So we want to find cannabis flowers that have high trichome content, because that's
Spell trichome.
Trichome.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay.
High trichome content. If you have like a cannabis grinder, right? You put your flower and you grind it up. Usually at the bottom, it's got a little mesh cage, and below it, it collects something that's called keef. Those are all the little crystals that are falling off the plant. I wouldn't use a grinder because I want that keef to stay on my flower, right? That's something that we want to stay on. So when we're looking at cannabis, it's what's important for you to, once you can, maybe I'll back it up even a little bit more. We all have an endocannabinoid system within our body, right? We actually naturally produce cannabinoids ourselves within our body. We have this endocannabinoid system. It maintains the balance within our central nervous system, within our immune cells. So when our body gets sick or something's wrong, it's actually our endocannabinoid system that's activating and focusing on those issues. So within the endocannabinoid system, we have these receptors. We have a CB1 receptor and a CB2 receptor. And that's what cannabinoids and terpenes bind with, right? To make us feel a certain way, right? That's why if we just consumed terpenes by themselves, it wouldn't do anything to us, right? If we consume an isolate of THC, right? So I was talking about when I first started, I was using isolates where I would eye drop on top. That means it was just pure THC. That's just going to bring on the psychoactive effects. You're not going to get any munchies from it. You're not going to get any therapeutic benefits. It's pure THC. It brings, anyone with a low tolerance can bring on anxiety and paranoia. It can be a useful tool in cooking, but I want to pull those therapeutic effects. So if we look at like what's at the top of the cannabis tree here, it's, when we look at the cannabis plant, we want to see what its terpene percentage content is, and to know what the CBD and THC content is. So what are the cannabinoids? The cannabinoids are what are giving us those psychoactive effects, giving us those benefits from the cannabis plant, and it's the terpenes that are giving us those therapeutic effects. So combined together, we can sort of make recipes that are specific towards something. It doesn't just have to be how high can I get off the brownie on Friday night? It can be, can I make something that after 8 days of, an 8-hour work day that can help me sort of recover and sleep a little better.
Right. And I do, that's what's exciting to me, because I do think that, obviously there's people that are, wanting to have fun and like get that little high or whatever, but really kind of what we're delving in here is like, okay, that's great. We're not saying that's not great. If that's, somebody's using that as opposed to having a cocktail or something like that. But then how do we then now take advantage of all the benefits?
Correct. Yeah.
And then, like when we talk about CBD, like that's not even really going to have so much of that psychoactive effect, but
absolutely,
but very much, some benefits.
You can still create an entourage effect with CBD and terpenes, right? So it's very important to sort of understand, 25 years ago, cooking with cannabis, chances are I'm going to some guy who lives in a shady apartment who's giving me my cannabis in a Ziploc bag. I don't know how it was grown. I don't know what fertilizers and chemicals were added in there. I don't know any information on the cannabinoids, the terpenes. He's created some name for it that I don't even know if is the real strain, right? All these details are really important and stuff that I need to know to be able to cook for strangers. Right. So that's the great thing about going into a dispensary, having that local bud tender. They should be able to answer these questions. I want to be cooking. The way I shop for my cannabis is no different for how I shop for my fresh produce, for my proteins. I find a local vendor that, I trust, that can bring in quality products. And the same goes with when I shop for my cannabis. I want to know, the details of those strains and that. When I'm creating a dish, it doesn't have to be, like you said, just getting high off of it. I have a ginger turmeric hummus. For me, that's my ultimate bedtime snack, where if I have that 2 hours before bed, I focus on a terpene blend of pinene and caryophyllene which are going to produce really high anti-inflammatory properties, right? It's going to focus more on the recovery side, and then decide whether if I want to help with the sleep aid, adding THC, or if I just want to focus more on the whole body recovery aspect and focusing just on CBD. So that's a dish that's not so much, hey, let's get high on the couch Friday night and watch a movie, but what I'm going to eat 2 hours before bed when I know I get that urge to have a snack, but I don't want to be grabbing a brownie. I don't want to eat the cookies, right? I want to have something a little more health conscious.
That sounds really good.
Yeah.
Where do I get some of that hummus?
The recipe's in my cookbook, so there you go.
Where can people get your cookbook?
You can find it on Amazon, or if you go to my Instagram page, at the top link in the bio has got a link to it there.
All right. And of course, we'll talk more where people can find your Instagram page and all of that. But I'm getting that cookbook. So I'm going to make some of that hummus because that sounds amazing. Yeah. So, well, I don't want to monopolize.
No, you're not. You're not. I mean, as I've said, this is an area where I'm very novice, if anything, neophyte.
Well, and I think a lot of people are, and there can be an intimidation factor of like, when we do our dinners, sometimes people are like, I don't want to ask a stupid question in front of people. And I always say to our guests, like, there's no stupid questions here. This is a great time to ask. And what we can find is, through our dinners and that, it can be an easier way to educate people. There are 5 main terpenes that people, if they spent a little time to learn about, will help the way you shop for your cannabis, the way you consume your cannabis. The first one we have is limonene, right? We find it in our citrus fruits. That gives us that energetic boost, right? We have pinene. We find it in our green garden herbs, basil, oregano. It's got great anti-inflammatory properties. It's good for alertness. We then have caryophyllene. We find it in peppercorns, sweet peppers, spicy peppers. Great anti-inflammatory properties. It's actually a terpene that if you've consumed too much cannabis and you're starting to feel the ill effects from it, by taking a couple of peppercorns and chewing on them, it will release that terpene and help subdue some of the effects. You're still on that ride, but it'll make it a little smoother. Then linalool, which we've talked about, we find it in lavender, a lot of flowers. Got great sedative properties to it, calmness. And then myrcene, which we find in mangoes, lemongrass, hops. That's the terpene that really gives you that couch lock. It's also responsible for the munchies. Right. So me personally, I really tried to avoid strains that are high in myrcene because that's where I do a lot of my poor choice of food. That's where I eat a lot of my poor foods is when I've just been consuming too much in one day and I'm kind of just zoned out. And right.
No, it's so interesting. Like when you explain this, and then, when you first started talking about this at our dinner, I was like, wow, light bulb goes off. And I think it's so interesting because, I know that there's a lot of people, when we talk about the bodybuilding world, in a lot of cases, during improvement season, sometimes people might want to use that to help with increasing appetite, like if they're having a hard time eating enough, but then during their cut where they're getting ready for stage, that would be something they'd want to stay away from because then they might, overdo it or something.
The thing is, we all react differently to terpenes. That's why someone might find a strain and they're like, this is the best strain ever. I get so much done. And then you try it and you're like, this isn't okay. It's good, but I didn't have that same reaction. And that's why journaling a month to 2 months worth of your cannabis use, of what strain was it, what were the terpene profiles, how did I feel after? You will notice a pattern after a while. For myself, pinene, limonene, caryophyllene, those 3 terpenes together, I'm not going to burn out. I'm not going to, munch out. I just, again, feel a little more ready to go. And, there's that time on Friday nights, when I want to zone out and I want to pass out on the couch, and there's a right cannabis product for that. It doesn't have to be going in and kind of shooting craps of like, give me an indica or sativa, and I don't really know what the blend is with it.
Well, I do think that's one of the big applications that in the health and fitness bodybuilding world is the anti-inflammatory and the sleep additive, because those are things that, especially during prep, people really struggle with.
Right, yeah.
Inflammation in particular can be just overwhelming for people, but as the body gets leaner, certain things are put out of balance, and so being able to get that good sleep at night, which is where the recovery is really going to occur, is a premium.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That was one thing I noticed.
But I also think that's why people kind of hedge on the THC,
right,
and or the sativa. And I know those are not. That this is my stupidity, but which I'm okay.
No, it's not your stupidity.
I'm okay asking stupid questions.
It's what the industry has presented and taught. So this is what people know. When we look at a market like California, which is the most advanced market for cannabis anywhere in the world, I would say, you can go in there. For one, they've got some of the most educated bud tenders, but the consumers are educated. The consumers have had access to some of the best cannabis for a very long time. And it's the consumers go in there and shop on cannabis. Brands label their terpene profiles on the bottles and that. And as we see, I see it with some brands here in Arizona. A brand like Alien Labs are connected. We can get all that information. I know they're a trusted supplier of their goal when they're producing their flower is high terpene profile. They know they're going to have enough THC in there, but it's how can we really produce that aroma, right?
I don't know if we mentioned this to you, but we went to Amsterdam last year. Did we tell you this story?
No.
So we went to Amsterdam last year, and we were looking forward to going into the
having the experience,
right? Yeah. And it was really interesting because at least where we were, you had to get it at one place and then go smoke it at another place. Yeah. So there was no combined use that we could find. That was one of the things. But the other thing that I think was most I don't want to use the word shocking, surprising, is that the highest quality blends
are all from California. They were like, what are you buying it for here? You guys are, from the States. You can get it from California. I was
just there a year and a half ago, and I found the same thing going in, and it was like, the cheap stuff was all the European stuff, right? Or you could pay 4 times the price and get the stuff from California. So,
we haven't talked about this yet, but I do think it's really important for people watching because, and I wish I would have said this at the outset, is that as we talk about this, look, we are presenting this as a health focus, okay? Yeah. This is not about getting high. This is not about the stoner, whatever culture, which honestly was in my era, okay? So back in my day. But this is a health breakthrough, I would say. And, we talk a lot about this with alcohol, is that alcohol has been accepted for so long, and yet alcohol produces some of the most societal impacts of more so than anything else. And I think, I grew up in this thing where at my Catholic school, marijuana is a gateway drug and it's going to, produce all these intended, all these bad effects over time. And honestly, I think that was just I know it was just the mainstream kind of propaganda that was really pushing that out there. The health impacts of cannabis and the potential health impacts of cannabis, the uses of hemp, for example, is an alternative. I mean, these things are things that can help our world. So as we present this today, I just want everybody to keep in mind, hey, this isn't like Cheech and Chong's Up in Smoke, or this is more.
That's what a lot of my dinners are about. I very much play against stoner culture. Right down to the music we play. It's Motown. It's not reggae and hip hop. And listen, stoner culture has its place. It's still.
And we're not passing judgment on that.
But I think for my dinners, how have I had 25,000 people come through? I've had over 1,000 first-time cannabis users. I was in London, England last November. I had 4 ladies over the age of 65 do cannabis for the first time in their life, 2.5 milligrams each. So, we're able to bring in that demographic who is like to call the canna curious, right? Is this what I think it is, or is it something different? I want to come in. Is this
what I've been told it is versus my own experience,
right? So when they come in, that's why I focus on all the details of what the music is. We want to seat everyone together at one table, because all of a sudden you have a table of strangers from all different walks of life who sit at a table. You're like, ooh, are they going to have anything to share? And but there's something special about this plant that really brings people together, right?
And I do think that's one of the primary things that really should be said about this is plant-based. I mean, this is not a chemical produced in a lab. Yeah. This is not a distilled item that produces alcohol with all the other additives that are contained in it. Yeah. This is about as natural as we're going to get.
And especially the methods that I use to create my extractions. Right. And 70% of the time I'm using flower from scratch. If I'm going to use any sort of concentrate, it has to be a live resin. When we look at terpenes, there's two different forms. We have cannabis-derived terpenes and we have botanical terpenes. So botanical terpenes come from plants, fruits, and herbs. And then we've got our cannabis-derived terpenes. A lot of the vape products that we see with cannabis is a distillate of THC. So they've isolated THC by itself. It has no terpenes left in it. And now they add botanical terpenes in. Botanical terpenes, 5 milliliters of botanical terpene will cost you $50. 5 milliliters of a cannabis-derived terpene will cost you $500.
Wow.
Because the amount of plant matter you have to use to get to that. So cannabis companies a lot of times are going to try to, they want their bottom line down as low as possible. They're going to be adding these botanical terpenes in. I will not cook with botanical terpenes. I don't want to even smoke cannabis products that have botanical terpenes added into them. That's why even if we look at a lot of these hemp products that are out there right now, we go into states in the South and they were selling cannabis right in gas stations and that because it's a hemp product.
Right.
But they are adding all these additives into it. So you don't know really what you're consuming, what you're smoking in that. So we try to play against, it's an uphill battle, but we try and play against it. Creating those extractions from scratch allow me then to offer all of my guests individual dosing. So that's something where we really differentiate ourselves from other people. When you come in, whether you only need 2.5 milligrams, 50 milligrams, 100, we will customize that dosage personally for each guest. So it's almost as if every guest that sits down has an allergy. And we have to know exactly what that person is going to consume, because if we have someone that comes in with a low tolerance and is served the wrong plate, someone only needs 5 milligrams and they're given 50, there's a really high chance that one, they're going to get sick. And if they are somewhat skeptical or new to this coming in, they're never going to want to do it again.
Interested in changing your life or stepping on stage? Join FitBody Fusion today.
Experience the FitBody Fusion difference with tools, knowledge, and community support to reach your healthy and sustainable lifestyle.
We guide thousands on their fitness journeys, from seasoned athletes to those who are simply seeking a healthier life.
Our expert coaches provide personalized plans and unwavering support, empowering you to thrive.
FitBody Fusion is more than just training. It's a community. We understand the challenges of solo fitness journeys, which is why we foster a supportive environment where members encourage and motivate each other.
Join the FitBody Fusion community today and unlock your full potential.
Head to fitbodyfusion.com to sign up for a free consultation.
And do it today. Yeah. If it's
right.
that takes me back again. Back in my day, to a lot of parents would break their kids' habit of smoking by saying, "You want to smoke? Here you go." And they smoke, and then they get sick on it, and that would then turn them off to ever wanting to smoke again. Which is very funny because as we cross over to the bodybuilding world, one of my first jobs as a personal trainer was at I won't mention the gym, but we were actually incentivized to make the workout so hard for first timers that they would throw up, and if they did, they would be less likely to come back. So they would sell gym memberships at a very low rate. And great, we get the revenue in, but we don't get the revenue if the person keeps coming back. So hey, let's make their first experience really poor, and that way they won't come back. It was a great, great business model, horrible societal or ethical model, but from a business point of view, great. But I do think about this is that and I'm wondering, I'm sorry, now I'm dominating. So I'm wondering if it would be worthwhile for us to just kind of talk about the experience. And today, if you're listening to this, I'm using your word, the experience. So let's talk about the experience from start to finish. Can Can we do that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I think you guys can really touch on it too, coming in your first time, but from a side of that's putting on the event, from creating the extractions, I don't know any of my guests' tolerance levels until they come in. I don't take it ahead of time. And I want each guest to sit down and me kind of explain the whole process. This is who I am. This is what we're going to do.
And you did miss one little step. So in the coordination part with you, as we arranged for the event, you go over menu items and we select certain things and you give us options and, hey, what do you like?
That was in our private event, but
right.
So if a lot of his events
that's true.
Yeah. So there's two different ways I put on my dinners. We can do a private dinner where we come in and put on something specifically for a group, or we have the Nomadic Nights tour, which goes city to city and people would just buy singular tickets for. Now, when you buy a singular ticket, we can accommodate dietary restrictions as long as we know ahead of time. So, hey, I can't have
dairy,
right? Mm-hmm. Tell me ahead of time, we can do it. Show up. It's going to be really tough.
Although you did do a vegan on the fly, I think we threw that at you last time. But we're not saying do that. Don't do that to Chef Chuck. Tell him ahead of time.
Yes. But when we do the private dinner, again, we create a menu and we try and find something that delivers for all the guests that are coming in. Then on my side, I need to be 100% confident in all of my dosing, right? Because we're going to be dosing everyone individually based on their own tolerance level. We have, let's say, a 5-course menu. Every course will have one infused component to it. I think we did a Big Mac egg roll for you guys one time where I made an infused Big Mac sauce. That sauce is made 4 times. I make it once with no cannabis, once with a low amount, medium, and high. And I will do that for every course. That will give me the flexibility to be able to keep plate consistency. Every plate that goes out needs to look the same, but every plate has a different dosage of cannabis put into it. So there's some math that's involved, which ironically, that was the class in high school. I was probably consuming cannabis out in the parking lot and not attending. I was like, I don't need those math equations. Right?
And Travis, when you're in a nomadic event versus a private event, at least in our event, and I don't know if it's the same way, you go around to every person in the event and you determine what they're
and I still do that in the public events. I will never send a server out there to do it because again, there are guests coming in who are nervous. You have partners that come in where one person does consume, one doesn't want to. And we have found many a times after I give my speech, people who weren't going to try it all of a sudden, hey, can I get the lowest amount? I always say to people, if you're ever going to do it, this is the time to do it because accuracy on dosing is my number one priority. I don't get return customers if we're not, doing what we say we're going to do and dosing accurately. So I have to ahead of time, because I don't know what your guys' tolerance are, be able to have a plan that will allow for a smooth service. So I got to create my extractions for every course, have the math right for those. I then, as you guys remember, I have a recommended dosing scale. So when the guests sit down, they can either tell me exactly their tolerance level, or we do 5 milligrams, 10 milligrams, 25, 50, 100. So those are the 5 choices that they can pick through.
And the milligrams are the THC concentration.
Correct, okay. Yes. So the way that sort of works is anyone who's lower on my scale, so if you're only 5 milligrams of THC, you're going to get about 15 milligrams of CBD with that. It's really important the lower on the tolerance scale of THC that you're getting the appropriate amount of CBD with that, because that'll help suppress any anxiety or paranoia or ill effects the THC can bring on right away. As you go up higher with tolerance, the CBD requirement becomes lower, right? Because your tolerance is higher, you want that THC. You don't want something suppressing it. Plus, it would take a lot of CBD to suppress 100 milligram tolerance, right?
Yes.
So, I have to now create a service plan. How am I going to serve all my 100 milligrams? Because it's not just 20 milligram, for every course, 20, 20, 20. I create sort of a wave, right? I want the guests to feel a first rush at some point in the dinner and then a second rush after the dinner, right? So you kind of bring you up and down and up and down. So I have to create a plan ahead of time. How am I going to dose all of these through my course? Because I have a goal of a 90-minute service. I usually don't want to sit at a dinner table longer than 2 hours. And so that's always been my goal with our service. I can't be stopping and starting and checking charts, and I have to be confident. I have to have a system set up, whether it's color coding those squeeze bottles to know which is which. So for that course, I can move. And then also having that service plan ahead of time. How am I going to dose my 100 milligrams? Okay, we're going to do 30 milligrams here, 10 here, 5 here, 25, right? And that will allow for a quick service, a smooth transition of getting it out. Then I need to make sure, when we do your dinners, the private, it was a lot smaller. So it's just me and my sous chef. The public dinners, we have servers, right? These servers are hired usually through an app. So they're not an official Nomad Cook team member. They're new to what's going on. So they need to understand table number, seat number, which we would think would be a very easy concept. But
I know I could see where that would be very important, because I've been at a restaurant before where, a professional server will mix up the plate. So, I could imagine.
So, an hour before our public dinner starts, I got to take those team members and, like any kitchen crew would do, here's a little pre-service meeting. This is our menu. This is what we're serving. This is how you explain it. I have to go with them. Okay, table number, seat number, right? Let's walk through the setting. This is table 1. This is seat 1. Always, I will only send 2 plates out. So we'll never have a server carrying 4 plates because, again, you have to know which plate is which. That's why we explain to them, every person has an allergy, right? Every person is deathly allergic to something. So we have to drop the right plate off. And that's
so has that ever happened?
Yeah,
where, when 5 milligram gets 100 milligram?
When I first started doing this, from me creating extractions, and that the first 1,000 guests, I wouldn't call them guinea pigs, but they really helped me just
figure out a process. Yeah,
right. I'm at a position now where I would say my accuracy is pretty dead on because having served 25,000 people now, it's just like anything. You put in your 10,000 hours, right? You start to perfect something in that. Anytime I've taken a shortcut, mistakes have happened. And it's what I teach to my sous chef, anyone that comes in now. We all have these shortcuts in the kitchen where cooking with cannabis can almost be like baking. You have to follow the recipe, and I've created a safety model of these steps to do beforehand, steps to do during a dinner, right, to make sure that we're minimizing against these mistakes. Because again, greening out a guest means they're probably never going to come back, not just to my dinner, but the cuisine.
What do you call it? Greening out?
Greening out.
Okay.
That's a green out. Yeah.
Okay.
So we got blackouts when you drink too much. Okay. Green out when you too much. And I experienced my first green out, I want to say 7 years ago. I was house sitting a chef's house and we made pizza, and I reached above into the oil cabinet. There was a black bottle, no label. And that's the oil I'm going to use to drizzle on my pizza and brush my crust. No. And I ate 3/4 of that pizza. And about 40 minutes later, while I was sitting watching TV, all of a sudden my ears started ringing. My vision started going bright. My heart rate was picking up. And I thought I was having a heart attack. I was like, oh my God, because I did not consume any cannabis knowingly. I wasn't smoking any. So I wasn't expecting to have anything. And it took about 10 minutes. It was a horrible experience. It took about 10 minutes to start. What was I eating? What was I doing?
Like 10 hours, yeah.
Right. And then, oh my God, the oil, grab the oil, look at it. Then I can kind of laugh it off a little bit. Okay, I'm not dying right now. But for me to go through that experience, it's almost like the cop that has to get tased before he's allowed to use the taser, right? I'm glad I went through that experience because I don't want anyone to ever go through that. It gets horrible. So, that's why I've sort of, after the cookbook came out, I saw that there was a huge appetite, pardon the pun, but for education and knowledge around this. So I created an online course to train not just chefs, but home cooks. One, train you about the plants. You understand the terms, the different types of cannabis, teach you about the terpenes, right? Really important to know these 5 to 8 terpenes. Then all these safety steps that we can implement, and what are the extraction methods to sort of create the extractions? Because it's not just let's maximize the THC and the weed butter and put all that into the brownie batter. there's a lot more different steps. That course has just been picked up by the American Culinary Federation, and it's been implemented as their official prerequisite training course for the next 2 years.
Yeah.
So any chef in America that wants to really start taking this is really big for this movement, because this is now a culinary board saying, okay, we need to implement some safety and education. We need to support this, not cannabis brands pushing an initiative to help sell more cannabis, but and when we have that sort of credibility come in from an agency like that, it moves us one step forward from, hidden Airbnb pop-ups to restaurant a la carte. I want to go in and have mac and cheese today with 20 milligrams in it.
Right. Well, it's so interesting. And I actually have had my very first time ever experiencing edibles. I had a similar experience where it was a homemade sort of situation. So you have really no idea what your intake is going to be. And I feel like it was, and maybe it felt like it was 2 days, but I felt like it was literally so long of me feeling uncomfortably high, like in a way that just, it wasn't like, when I've gone to your dinners, it's interesting because it's a very different feeling and a different experience. And when you educated on the whole plant versus it made a lot of sense to me because, it isn't like you feel floored or you feel out of control. It's kind of more that uplifting, feeling, the kind of good positive effects. But I did have the green out before, and it's not a fun experience.
No, it's not. Even for an experienced cannabis user, it still is not fun. You feel real sick. Now, I mean, the one positive and the one thing we can say is you're not going to die. No one has ever died from over consuming cannabis. Lots of horrible things have come from over consuming alcohol, right?
And including death.
Absolutely. Yeah. Right. So you listen, bad things can happen when you abuse and take too much of anything.
Including water for that matter. Right? Too much water, you could die.
What do you always say, babe? It's not it's the dose.
The dosage makes the poison. Yeah.
Right. So again, with our dinners, you can come in and it's not, the dining experience isn't about getting super stoned.
No.
Now I have a dinner coming up in a couple of weeks. We're bringing some chefs in from around the US, and we're actually incorporating smoking into it. So this dinner wouldn't be something that would be a perfect introduction for someone who's never consumed before, because we're going to actually have a strain in a little pre-roll next year, fork, knife, spoon, where we'll ask the guest, take that joint, light it up, take that first puff, and then take a bite of your food, right? Let's pair the terpenes between the smoke and that. And so there's a time and a place where I know that dinner, we're going to be a lot of 100 milligrams. There are going to be a lot of people that are going to want to consume a lot of cannabis, and that's that demographic. We create events specifically for that. But when I'm touring around, going city to city, I want those kind of curious guests coming in. Those people who've never had cannabis before, those are my favorite guests to come in, because if dosed correctly, they are going to tell everyone in their circle, right? I did cannabis for the first time. It was great. I slept well. I enjoyed the experience, So those are the guests that are really helping this move forward. But again, on the flip side as well, the guests who have a high tolerance, it's really important that we offer a high dosage for them as well, because the tickets aren't cheap to come to these dinners. It's very expensive to move a kitchen city to city. So we have,
and the quality of the food and the preparation and all of that goes into it, because to me, it's an experience.
It's definitely an experience.
Yeah, it's not just about the cannabis.
Correct,
I mean, that's a little piece of it.
That's what brings guests in. And I always say what brings guests back is that they come in not expecting to get this experience. And then all of a sudden they're like, wow, that was really enjoyable. We have certain cities where in Chicago, like Chicago, for an example, which was my number one city last year, we had over 600 people through 4 visits. And we had a group of strangers at the very first dinner that created a Facebook group. And they came back as a group to every time I came back. And that was the kind of them to all sit down again together. So,
and I think we've implied this or inferred this throughout this interview or conversation, but I want to make it very clear is that Travis's events are a gourmet experience.
Yes.
So I know that the discussion that we're having is THC, terpene, the cannabinoids,
That's right.
Cannabinoids focus. But I can assure everyone that's listening is that Travis's event is a gourmet meal. And I'm not saying that I am not. Jamie's more experienced at this than I am. But going to a chef's restaurant where they bring out different courses. Meals and it's a high gourmet experience. And what I would say with Travis's events they are gourmet first, and the THC, it's just another ingredient. It's an accessory item. It's part of the
cuisine style.
Yeah,
right.
That's what it is, right? Yeah. You go to if you think about it, you can go for sushi, right? We can get the sushi boat, where you've got the train that goes around and you just take what you want as you need. You can go into a little nicer of a sushi place, or you can go in for that omakase style where they only take 10 people and you get to sit down and really immerse yourself with the chef.
Yeah.
And that's what we're offering. It's especially what I'm focusing more on this year is 12-person seatings, right? Whereas last year we were doing a lot of 40-person, and I enjoy it. It's more intimate it's a better experience for everyone. I get to laugh a little more, and there's a little less stress. I can add a little more into it, and we can really connect with those guests. Yeah. We do events like a wake and bake brunch where we can offer a ticket for $125. We try and find ways to make this more accessible for people to come in. But my goal really is to open the door for the next generation of chefs, because as we move this into the mainstream, the price is going to become a lot more affordable. Right? One area I don't really go and host dinners in is LA. And mainly because there are a lot of cannabis chefs in LA, and you can go do a cannabis dinner there for $100. Unfortunately, I have to rent Airbnbs, flights, cars. I have traveling staff. My overhead's so high, I just can't do $100 ticket in LA. So great. That's in a market that has evolved to where you have choices and options, which have brought the price down. And that's what I want to see everywhere. Yeah. Right? And that's kind of why I go everywhere, is how can we inspire more people to start taking these steps to, do their own little supper clubs, because that's how we're going to move this forward.
Right. Well, that's what's exciting about everything that you're doing with your courses, with your cookbook, like to be able to teach, like you said, other chefs, but then also so that people can utilize this. And I know we're getting close to time on this episode, but I really want to delve into, more. And so you guys who've enjoyed this episode, look for the next episode, but how to, have some of these athletes that do watch our podcast kind of start utilizing this even for themselves, whether it be meal prep or, for sleep. I loved the hummus idea. I feel like there's just so much more that we can talk about. And I know you have another question, but
no, I really didn't. It was just more I don't know why I feel like I want to make it clear to everybody, because I just think that some people might be listening to this thinking, hey, we're going to get a Happy Meal from McDonald's and we're going to just squirt some THC on it. And hey,
I think he made it pretty clear that's not what he's doing.
Right? This is a high gourmet experience. I mean, and the events that we've had have been very intimate, very. There's a difference in those events.
To just kind of, when we wrap it up here on this last thing, is, for a long time, I played so against stoner culture that all of the dishes I was putting out were these chefy dishes, tartare and crudos. And last year for 420, we did our first big national tour, which we're duplicating again this year with 2 different tours going at the same time. But for that tour, we played into stoner dishes, Big Mac egg roll, Crunchwrap Supremes, and the response from people was through the roof. So I've also learned,
but you're still chef-izing those.
Yes, we still want to elevate it, but I've also learned, there are people who maybe, I don't want to say picky eaters, but sometimes maybe get a little intimidated from dishes. So, we have also learned we can have more fun. We don't have to be so serious.
Right. There's not one way.
Right. Yeah. So we do, for 420 this year, we're 22 different cities around the U.S. that we'll be in, and on 2 different tours, and our menus are are a lot of taking some dishes and having fun with it.
Yeah.
You know, a tiramisu milkshake. That's our
Oh
dessert.
my God, that sounds good. I don't think that's on anybody's meal plan at this point. Just kidding. It's cheat day. Reward day.
That's it. Reward day. We don't believe in cheat days.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I mean, I learn from you literally every time we get together. So I'm so happy that we are having a chance to have you on and kind of delve into some of these things, because truly, I had no idea about the terpenes and some of the other things that you've explained. And I feel like it can really be a game changer when people start to understand. I had never thought about the journaling, which I'm really glad you brought up on this episode, because I'm literally going to implement this because, I have noticed, and it's funny because, we'll have people over and maybe we'll have, whether it's smoking or doing it, whatever, different people do have different effects to things. So kind of figuring out like what works for me personally, because, for me, there's a lot of therapeutic uses, both in terms of, getting good sleep, going into those deeper levels of sleep, sometimes with digestive issues, sometimes with appetite. So, I mean, because I found some strains actually help decrease appetite, some help increase, and there's...
Well, that's a terpene called humulene. It's an appetite suppressant. So it's, again, a terpene. When I'm shopping for cannabis, that's something I see in a strain. It's something that I'm going to levitate towards, because again, that's my Achilles heel with cannabis, is that I eat too much. I keep going back to the cupboard, and I will put crazy things together because I'm stoned and I'm a chef, and I'm like, let's try this out.
Getting real creative. I'm coming over to your house. No, I'm just kidding. But no, I do think that is something that holds some people back, because maybe they've tried, cannabis and they've had that kind of response, and then they're scared to do it again because they don't want to go and start overeating. And especially, if they're an athlete, they're in prep or whatever. So, I mean, I found that like you said, like if you know how to stay away from the ones that are going to cause the munchies, and then, utilize some of the ones that are going to help decrease that a bit, it can still have the benefits of the sleep or whatever else, the recovery, the inflammation, all these other great benefits, but without, the overindulging. So always learning, always growing. And I think that we're just really scratching the surface in our world of fitness and bodybuilding to be able to properly utilize the cannabis plant, in the best ways.
No, that's it. No. I was laughing only because I was just going back to some, I think that weed and other drugs have been in the bodybuilding world. I don't think they've been there forever. And I just think that there's a huge difference between the stoner culture, which exists in the bodybuilding world as well, versus...
Which we're not putting down either.
No, we're not. And it's not a judgment on that. But what we are here to present and to advocate really is, and I do think advocating is that there is a therapeutic use for this. Just the same way there's a therapeutic use for a protein, therapeutic use for any kind of supplement that you might have. And this is really, this is a supplement. And that's how we're presenting this, is
and that's how I bring it through the dining experience, right? It's not, this is there to heighten your sensories, right? And it opens up communication with other guests at the table. This is what I've seen. All cultures share the same experience around a dinner table. And there's something special that comes out when we can incorporate cannabis safely and accurately, right? Getting everyone super stoned at a dinner table would be a very boring dinner, because I don't know how much conversation would be going on. I think a lot of people, they'd be in their heads, and some
I don't know if there's going to be a lot of laughher. I think there would be a lot of laughter for you. I think some people are going to be like, wow, just like, but you're not, the point that you're making, and which I think is a really good point, is that it's about connection. And how do we foster that connection? And then what are the other therapeutic uses that can expand what options are out there for people, especially because not everything is going to be effective for everybody. So when you have multiple tools that you can pull out depending on the outcome that you're seeking, that just gives you more flexibility, more variety, more variability, and right tool for right task. So talk to people about
tell us how people can find you and get in touch with you.
Yeah. So the best social media platform to follow me on will be Instagram. I'm a very old millennial, so that is the platform I've dedicated to. I don't do TikTok. A lot of the platforms don't allow for cannabis, so that has been the tricky thing to sort of navigate, is how do we get our message out there with the shadow banning that goes on. But at _Nomad Cook, It's a verified page. There are some knockoffs out there, so make sure you follow the right one. But or my website, thenomadcook.com. We post all of our events that we host dinners in through Instagram, and with the announcement of the American Culinary Federation putting the education platform out there, a lot of this year I'm focused on is educating. So find me traveling all around the country this summer and fall, hosting lectures and seminars and trying to really inspire this next generation of chefs to keep moving this forward.
I love
Fantastic. All right, we ready to wrap it up?
Yes.
All right, then remember, what are the, I got to say this, remember checkout word, that's right.
What's your checkout
So we got
word?
a check-in
So
word,
you told us
recharged.
What's my checkout word?
Yeah.
Yes.
Don't say stoned. Sorry.
What is my word to just check out?
How are you feeling?
How are you feeling right now? Yeah.
Inspired.
Okay.
Perfect.
I love it.
I love it.
Yeah.
So are we.
Yeah. And we are. This is great. I can't wait for part 2 of this or whatever we call part 2. But for everybody else, remember that as you're thinking about part 2, think about liking, comment, and subscribing, and leaving your review for our podcast.
That one wasn't smooth.
No, it wasn't smooth. I was struggling because I was thinking, where can I work in terpene or cannabis or something? I just wasn't coming up with it. So
he'll work on that.
I'll work on it. In the meantime, remember the 3 B's.
Be good to yourself.
Be good to each other, and be safe. Take care, everybody.
Thank you for tuning in to FitBody Lifestyle. We hope today's episode has left you feeling motivated and equipped to tackle your fitness goals, business challenges, and the daily dance of life. Remember to value progress over perfection. Life's tough enough alone. Find the chosen family around you to help you along the way.
If you enjoyed today's episode, we'd really appreciate it if you would subscribe and leave us a review on your favorite streaming platform. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram at FitBody Fusion.